Hey, why don't you marry me? I'm a better match for you than that plain Emily, right? As she spoke, my sister draped her arm over my husband's shoulder, sidling up to him. Watching this, the restraint I'd been holding onto snapped. I felt the tightly wound thread within me break. Stop messing around. You've always been like this, I shouted, lunging at my sister. At that moment, she toppled over ungracefully. Still in that awkward position, she opened her eyes wide. A moment of silence fell. This is the story of the ending my atrocious sister and I reached. My name is Emily, 27 years old. After graduating from the literature department of a state university, I've been working as a librarian in a public library. During my lunch break, I checked my smartphone and found a message from my sister Michelle, who is a year older than me. I'm going to use your blue sandals. They still look like new, but that's fine, right? I let out a sigh. My sister has always been like this since we were kids. Whenever I had something she perceived as better than hers, she quickly coveted it, got bored, and then dumped it back on me. Even from a family member's perspective, my sister is beautiful. I remember when we were kids, she was adored by adults and often compared to a French doll. She went to a prestigious private university on a recommendation and even won a beauty pageant there. Now, she's leveraging her beauty, working as a receptionist at a well-known company, living a life straight out of a fairy tale. In contrast, I'm truly plain. I have a very typical American face, and people often tell me, Emily, you're like a traditional doll. Maybe it's because of my sister's constant bullying, but I'm often told that I'm very shy and introverted. Since childhood, while my sister played with dolls, I was the kind of kid who would sit alone and quietly read a book. But that's fine with me. I want to live a life surrounded by books. I've studied hard with that sole intention, and now I'm working as a librarian, a job I've always dreamed of. Processing checkouts with barcodes, finding books that users are searching for, it's perfect. While working at the library, I often remember something from my high school days. I attended the same high school as my sister, and I was exhausted by remarks and stares like, oh, is this what Michelle's sister is like? My only joy was writing book reviews of my favorite books as part of the library committee activities. Most regular high school students, busy with clubs and romance, would not pay attention to such things, but I kept writing, hoping that they would understand the charm of my favorite books, even though I knew that no one would read them. However, there was just one person who would enthusiastically read my reviews. This male student would borrow the books that I reviewed one after another. I felt a sense of validation, which made me happy. He was a year ahead of me in school, and our relationship was nothing more than that of a student and a librarian. Due to my introverted personality, we never spoke except during the borrowing procedures. Despite this, I always remembered his name on the library card. I wondered how he was doing now. Does he still like reading books? Occasionally, I thought about him, the person who made me continue to love books. Then one day, a marriage proposal came in for my older sister. At 28, my sister Michelle was of marriageable age, so it was only natural for such talks to come up. What, a blind date with this guy? Michelle exaggeratedly threw the blind date photos and the man's profile on the table. The loud sound startled me as I was eating. Well, what kind of person is he? My mother asked. He's just this chubby and nerdy-looking guy, and he's currently a temp. Why do I have to go on a blind date with such a guy? If you don't like him, just reject him, I said. But he's related to some executive at our client's company. I can't just reject him. It's terrible. Michelle made a troubled face, then suddenly her expression brightened. Oh, I know. Emily, you should go on the blind date. I was shocked at her suggestion. Seeing my wide-eyed surprise, Michelle hurriedly explained, you're a respectable nerd yourself, right? You might hit it off with him. No matter how I look at it, he's not my type, but he might be perfect for you since you're not exactly a looker. So could you please take my place this weekend? What are you talking about? I don't want to do it either, and it would be rude to the other party. And how should I explain me going in your place? It'll work out as long as you go on the date. But don't you dare tarnish my reputation. Michelle forcefully shoved the open blind date photo and profile in my direction. Looking at them, I let out a surprised sound. What? Do you have a problem? No, not at all. Thanks, Michelle. I'll take the match, I replied. Really? You actually like that chubby nerd? Well, I'll hand him over. I'm excited to see the nerdy couple in action, Michelle teased. I chose to ignore Michelle's mocking tone and continue to focus on the blind date photo and the man's profile. On the day of the date, I first apologized to the man for Michelle's rudeness and then expressed my interest in getting to know him better. The man across from me was indeed chubby and had a distinctly nerdy vibe, but he still seemed familiar. As it turned out, he was the same person who used to borrow books based on my reviews. He looked at me and asked softly, were you by any chance the librarian at our high school? Yes, I was. I remember you too, I responded. From that point on, we connected over our shared memories of high school and our love for books. This marked the beginning of our relationship. Thomas was in the same school year as Michelle, but she didn't seem to remember him at all. During one of our dates, Thomas said to me, "Honestly, Emily, if Michelle had shown up, I would have turned her down. Her reputation precedes her," Thomas admitted. "Given who I am, I guess Michelle would have probably rejected me first," I replied with a rueful smile. "I'm truly sorry about what happened with my sister, but I was really happy to see you again, Thomas. I think you're wonderful just the way you are. If you're worried about your appearance, how about we try losing some weight together?" "You're right. I've been so absorbed in my work that I've neglected exercising and my appearance. I'll make an effort so you won't feel disappointed in me." "I'm glad to hear that, but you should know I would never judge you based on your appearance." Our conversations flowed easily, and our dates were delightful. Eventually, Thomas proposed, and we decided to marry. Although my sister, who said, "I've seen that guy before," didn't attend the wedding, our families came together in a warm and supportive atmosphere. Afterward, we found a new home and began our life together. On the day of our wedding, honestly, Emily, having a wedding in a church is so typical of you. And that dress, it makes you look like a real American doll, my sister mocked as usual. "Can we please put a stop to the jabs for today? We're about to meet the family," I said, feeling disheartened by her remarks, even on my wedding day. Thomas and his family arrived soon after. "Good morning. We're excited for today," they greeted warmly. When Thomas, dressed impeccably in his suit, made his entrance, my sister's eyes widened in surprise. "What?" she exclaimed softly. It was clear why she was astonished. Thomas had put in significant effort to improve his appearance alongside me, and he now looked strikingly handsome. Before the ceremony began, my sister leaned in and whispered, "He looks nothing like the photo from before." Thomas worked hard on himself. He was already handsome, I replied with a smile. In the photo, Thomas had looked dull due to being overweight and having a poor haircut. I even wondered if he'd had plastic surgery. But it was wonderful that someone as beautiful as you could marry a man who now looked like a movie star. Despite enduring my sister's sarcasm, we managed to get through the wedding ceremony. We had a small, intimate reception at the church with only our closest loved ones. Just as we were about to leave, basking in our joy, something unexpected happened. "Hello, Thomas. Thanks for marrying my ugly little sister." My sister, clearly intoxicated, approached us. "Emily isn't ugly at all. Thank you for coming today. Shouldn't you be heading home?" I suggested, but my sister ignored me. "So, Thomas, you've changed your appearance, but what about your job? I heard you're just a temp." "Yes, I'm currently working as a temp." "Oh, I can't stand having a temp as a husband. I'm dating a startup CEO now. I might get married soon." "Congratulations," Thomas said politely. "Hey, sister," Thomas gently stopped me from responding and shook his head slightly. "Thank you for coming today. Please be careful on your way home." My sister, with a final remark of "be very happy," left. "I'm really sorry about my sister," I said to Thomas. "It's all right. People like her won't change no matter what you say. But Emily, you've been through a lot. Let's focus on our happiness from now on." "Thank you, Thomas." And so, our married life together began. Thomas was working as a temp while pursuing his dream of becoming a novelist. His love for reading began with book reviews I wrote back in high school, which inspired him to start writing. Although he had only published a few pieces in literary magazines so far, it was still an impressive accomplishment. While he was earning from his manuscripts, he admitted that financial stability was still a concern, which is why he balanced his temp job with his writing. "Thomas, I have a job too, and we have some savings. Why don't you focus solely on your writing?" I suggested. "Emily, you're always so supportive." "Thank you. I'll give it my all," he replied. With that, Thomas left his temp job and devoted himself fully to his writing. Though it wasn't easy, I found joy in watching him immerse himself in his work, and that passion kept us going. One day, we received a call from my sister, Michelle. She was engaged to the startup CEO she had mentioned before. Next week, he's coming over to meet the family before the wedding. You should come too. I'd prefer not to introduce him to you and your jobless husband, but it would be awkward if you weren't there. Please make sure you dress appropriately. Despite my irritation at Michelle's attitude, I knew we had to attend her engagement event. Thomas and I prepared to join the family gathering. I'm sorry you have to miss your important event that day, Thomas, I said. It's okay, Emily. She's your sister, Thomas reassured me. When we arrived at the meeting, Michelle greeted us with her usual smug expression. Welcome, the antisocial couple. Please be nice to my fiancé, Michelle greeted us with her usual sarcasm. Ignoring her jabs, we entered the restaurant and exchanged pleasantries with Michelle's fiancé. He was a strikingly handsome man, quite the opposite of Thomas, but he did seem competent in his field. I'm Emily, Michelle's sister. It's nice to meet you. And I'm Thomas, Emily's husband. Nice to meet you, Thomas added. Michelle's fiancé, Larry, returned our greetings with a polite nod. Nice to meet you too. I did my best to overlook Michelle, who was standing next to him with a self-satisfied grin. Just then, Thomas's phone rang. I'm sorry, I need to take this call. It's important, he said, stepping outside. As Thomas left the room, I couldn't shake my anxiety despite being surrounded by our parents, Michelle, and her fiancé. My thoughts were elsewhere. Soon, Thomas returned, looking flustered, and leaned in to whisper something in my ear. Really? Congratulations, Thomas. That's incredible, I exclaimed, unable to contain my excitement. What's going on? Is this the right time for such news? My mother asked, looking surprised. Thomas's novel won a major literary award and is going to be adapted into a movie, I announced. Is that true? Congratulations, Thomas, my mother said, clearly thrilled. Yes, that's wonderful news, Thomas. All the support Emily gave you has definitely paid off, our parents beamed with joy. Congratulations, Thomas. I'm so happy to hear this. Larry chimed in, applauding. Let's toast to celebrate. I'm sorry, but I need to handle some interviews about the award, Thomas said. All right, I suppose that's all for now, my mom began to say, but then something unexpected happened. Michelle, who had been sitting next to Larry, suddenly stood up and walked over to us, positioning herself between Thomas and me. Hey sis, what are you? Be quiet, you ugly thing, Michelle cut me off sharply. Michelle's voice was icy. Thomas, why don't we get married? I'm sure I'm a better match for a successful award-winning author like you than someone like Emily, she said, placing a hand on Thomas's shoulder and leaning in close. I felt like everything was falling apart. Michelle always wants whatever I have and discards it when she grows bored. She consistently belittles both Thomas and me, and I've put up with it because she's my sister. But this was the last straw. I felt a breaking point within me. Enough, Michelle. You've always been like this, I shouted, moving toward her. Startled, Michelle stumbled and fell awkwardly. Thomas, who had been leaning on Michelle, quickly stepped back. Michelle landed on the carpet, her eyes wide with shock. I stood frozen. What are you doing? That's what I should be asking, Thomas said with a frigid tone. He looked down at Michelle with disdain. What were you thinking? I was just offering to marry you, Michelle stammered. Even if I were the last man on earth, I'd still say no. Emily is the only one for me for life. What? What's so special about Emily? I'm prettier. I have a better figure. Emily is not just more beautiful on the outside, but also on the inside. She's been my steadfast support through everything. That's why I've achieved what I have, something you could never do. Thomas walked over to me and put his arm around my shoulders. As he did, my anger toward Michelle began to melt away, replaced by warm tears streaming down my face. What the hell? After all my advances, you still rejected me. Michelle's face flushed bright red, and her voice trembled with anger. Michelle, what on earth are you doing? Do you even realize what kind of occasion this is? Isn't Larry supposed to be your fiancé? Our parents, finally coming to their senses, quickly reprimanded her. As if awakening from a daze, Michelle dashed over to Larry. I'm sorry, Larry. I guess it has to be you after all. Enough. Just stop talking, Larry said, straightening his tie. Who would want to marry a woman who throws herself at a married man during a meet and greet? Let's call off this engagement. I'm sure you understand why. Our parents went pale and nodded in agreement, unable to say anything. Wait a minute, Larry. You can't just back out now. I've already told everyone we're getting married. This'll cause a mess if you back out, Michelle shouted, but Larry remained calm. I think it's time for me to leave. Congratulations again, Thomas. Best wishes. With that, Larry left the room, and we could only bow our heads in silence. Wait, Larry, Larry. Michelle's frantic cries echoed through the restaurant. I'm appalled. Don't show your face around here for a while. Our parents, casting one last contemptuous glance at Michelle, left the restaurant as well. Emily, let's go home. I tightened my grip on Thomas's hand as he reached for mine. Turning around, I saw my sister slumped in a daze. A few months later, after her engagement with Larry ended, my sister initially seemed despondent but is now fervently searching for a new partner. However, she's only pursuing high-profile men and seems surprised by their reaction to her mercenary approach. With age starting to diminish her beauty, she may struggle to find a suitable match. As for us, Thomas, who was busy with award ceremonies, interviews, and film releases, is now focused on his next project. He has always been kind to me, but he's now celebrated as a devoted husband, often sharing stories about me during his interviews. As I support my growing belly from pregnancy, I am committed to supporting Thomas in all his endeavors.